The crisis phone has a special ringtone. It's not the frantic blare of an air raid siren or the stoic beep of a submarine sonar. Those are for amateurs. No, my crisis phone, a bright yellow burner I keep charged for exactly these moments, plays a calming, synthesized pan flute cover of "It's the End of the World as We Know It," and I feel fine. It's designed to be ironic, to keep me level-headed in the face of suburban Armageddon. Today it was failing spectacularly. The pan flute was barely audible over the frantic voice on the other end of the line. "Mr. Leo, I don't know if you're the right person to call. My assistant found your service on a local forum. It's called Nextdoor Calamity." "Suburban Solutions," I corrected calmly, already pulling on my steel-toed work boots. "And you're Dr. Anya Sharma from Mercy General, right?" "Yes. How did you—" "Never mind. We have a situation, a catastrophe. Our water pressure vanished, completely. It dropped to 0 8 minutes ago. The city water department is useless. They're talking about a potential main break, but it seems localized entirely to our block. Our block." Her voice was fraying, the professional veneer cracking under pressure. "We have 3 active surgeries, a full NICU, a dialysis ward that runs on water. We're on our emergency reserves, Mr. Leo, but that's a tank, not an ocean. We have hours, maybe less. Can you help?" Hours. A hospital full of vulnerable people had hours. I walked to the large bay window of my warehouse office, a space that overlooked the manicured, oppressively beige landscape of Harmony Creek Estates. I could see the stoic brick facade of Mercy General just 2 blocks away, a bastion of science and reason just beyond the grasp of my neighborhood's governing body. And I could see something else. There, standing on the perfectly edged border between civilization and the HOA, was the source of all my problems. Carol. Carol, president for life of the Harmony Creek Homeowners Association, dressed in a crisp white pantsuit, was standing next to the city's main water shutoff valve for the entire district. In her hand, she held a large industrial wrench. She wasn't turning it. The deed was already done. She was simply admiring her handiwork. Her gaze was fixed on her own front lawn, where her sprinklers, normally polite misters, were now blasting water with the force of a fire hose. The pressure that should have been supplying life support to a hospital was currently giving her prize-winning, champion-grade petunias a deep tissue massage. A slow smile spread across her face as she watched the deluge. It was the smile of a Bond villain who had just successfully aimed a space laser at Fort Knox. I took a deep breath, the synthesized pan flute suddenly sounding like a declaration of war. "Dr. Sharma," I said into the phone, my voice low and steady. "Your water problem is being addressed. Don't ask how. Don't call the city again. Just be ready to hook up to an auxiliary source in about 20 minutes. "An auxiliary source? What auxiliary source?" she asked, bewildered. I didn't answer. I was already looking past Carol's triumphant figure, toward the hospital, calculating angles, access points, and flow rates. A plan was already forming, a beautiful, absurd, and entirely necessary logistical ballet. To understand why my first thought upon hearing a hospital had lost its water was a 50-something woman with a gardening obsession, you need to understand Harmony Creek. It's less a neighborhood and more a social experiment in weaponized conformity. Our bylaws, bound in a 3-inch thick leather binder, dictate everything from the approved shades of taupe for your mailbox, there are 4, to the maximum allowable decibels for wind chimes. Spoiler, it's 0. And at the heart of this beige dystopia was Carol. I run a business called Suburban Solutions. It was born from an inheritance from my wildly eccentric Uncle Al, who left me a small fortune and a sprawling warehouse filled with the most bizarre collection of junk imaginable. He was a prepper, but not for the reasons you think. Uncle Al believed the real societal collapse wouldn't come from zombies, asteroids, or foreign invaders. It would come from petty squabbles, bureaucratic incompetence, and the breakdown of basic civility. He prepared for the HOA apocalypse. I decided to honor his legacy by turning his paranoia into a business model. Leaky sprinkler head flooding your prize-winning pumpkins the night before the county fair? I can install a French drain in under an hour. Raccoon family takes up residence in your attic 2 days before your in-laws arrive for Thanksgiving. I have a humane relocation system involving a trail of marshmallows and a surprisingly effective net cannon. I am the guy you call when your very specific first-world problem feels like the end of the world. I am a purveyor of domestic tranquility through overwhelming logistical superiority. And it put me on a collision course with Carol from day one. Our feud wasn't a single, explosive event. It was a war of 1,000 paper cuts. It began when she issued me a formal citation because the commercial-grade satellite dish on my warehouse, which I use for coordinating my solutions, was, and I quote, an affront to the rustic aesthetic of the neighborhood's skyline. I responded by filing a Freedom of Information Act request for the HOA's budget allocation for aesthetic enforcement. Things escalated. Last month, she came to my door with a laser level and a clipboard. My lawn, she informed me with grim satisfaction, was 4.25 inches tall. The Harmony Creek Bylaws, Article 17, Section B, Paragraph 3, clearly stated that grass height was not to exceed 4 inches. She wrote me a ticket for a 1/4 inch of rebellion. I retaliated. I noticed her Golden Trowel Award, the Heisman Trophy of competitive local gardening, which she had won 4 years running, was placed in her front window in such a way that, between 3:15 and 3:45 p.m., the sun reflected off it directly into the eyes of passing motorists. I filed a formal complaint with the city, citing a potential traffic hazard. An ordinance required her to move it. She saw me as a chaotic agent in her perfect world. I saw her as a case study in what happens when a person with no real power gets a little bit of it. We were matter and antimatter, destined to annihilate each other in a flash of passive-aggressive paperwork. Her obsession, the thing that fueled her entire existence, was the upcoming Golden Trowel competition. Winning it a 5th time would cement her legacy. Her garden was a masterpiece of horticultural tyranny. Every petal was perfect, every leaf immaculate. And it drank water like a herd of elephants. I'd long suspected she wasn't just using her sprinklers. The sheer volume of water required was astronomical. And now I knew how she was doing it. She hadn't just turned a valve. To get that kind of pressure, she must have done something to the main line. Something that had catastrophically cut off the hospital next door. Her quest for a perfect petunia was about to get people killed. I hung up the crisis phone. My blood was singing with a righteous, caffeinated fury. This wasn't just a job anymore. This was a calling. "Barry!" I bellowed, my voice echoing through the cavernous warehouse. "Cancel my afternoon. We're enacting protocol hydration freedom." From beneath the chassis of a golf cart, I was converting into an all-terrain pet retrieval vehicle. A pair of grease-stained legs scurried out. Barry, my right-hand man, my mechanic, my conscience, and the only person on earth who truly understood the beautiful madness of my work, sat up, wiping his hands on a rag. His face wore its default expression, a mixture of loyalty and deep existential concern. "The what now?" he asked, his brow furrowed. "I'm still trying to get the smell of expired cheese out of the milk truck's main tank from that Velveeta spill drill last month." "No time for cheese trauma, Barry," I said, striding over to a large magnetic sign leaning against the wall. I slapped it onto the side of a massive, gleaming white truck. The sign read, in bold, authoritative letters, "Emergency water transport. Mercy General is dry. A hostile actor has seized their water supply. We are the cavalry." The truck in question was the crown jewel of my fleet. A lovingly restored 1982 Borden milk truck. Its original logos long gone, replaced by a pristine, food-grade 10,000-gallon stainless steel tank. I called her the Moo Mover. Barry stared at the truck, then at me. A hostile actor? Leo, did you forget to pay the city water bill again? Worse, I said, grabbing a high-visibility vest and a clipboard. It's Carol. Barry's face paled. Oh no, not the grass lady. What did she do? She's weaponized municipal plumbing for the sake of horticulture. She's holding a hospital hostage. So we are going to roll down Harmony Creek Lane like the goddamn Red Cross, and we are going to deliver 20,000 gallons of sweet, life-saving potable water. This truck only holds 10,000, Barry pointed out, ever the pragmatist. Which is why you, I said, pointing at him, are going to get the hydrant and the six-pack operational. And I declared, climbing into the driver's seat of the Moo Mover, will fire up the pop cycle. Barry just sighed, a deep, weary sound that spoke of years of dealing with my particular brand of genius. The popsicle, of course, for morale. Exactly, I said, turning the key. The Moo Mover's engine rumbled to life with a satisfying diesel growl. 5 minutes. That's all it took from the moment civilization ended for Mercy General to the moment their salvation rumbled to life. A salvation that, admittedly, smelled faintly of pasteurization and played a tinny, slightly off-key version of Pop Goes the Weasel when you hit the horn. Let's roll. Leading a convoy of repurposed emergency vehicles through a suburban neighborhood is a unique experience. Curtains twitched. A man watering his lawn, with a normal hose, like a civilized person, stopped and stared, mouth agape. A group of kids on bikes screeched to a halt, pointing in silent, reverent awe. And what a sight we were! I was in the lead in the Moo Mover, its massive white tank gleaming in the afternoon sun. Behind me, Barry was at the wheel of the hydrant, a stunning, cherry-red 1970s Seagrave fire truck I'd bought at a city auction. Its pumps were long gone, replaced with a powerful generator and a series of high-pressure hoses designed to connect to, well, anything. It was technically just a very large, very loud pickup truck, but it looked official as hell. Bringing up the rear was the six-pack. 3 of my sturdiest Ford F-150 EUS, each carrying a 275-gallon food-grade water tote in its bed, strapped down and sloshing gently. And driving the lead pickup looking deeply embarrassed was me, having swapped places with Barry's assistant after prepping the final vehicle. The pièce de résistance of our little rescue fleet. The pop cycle. An old-school 1960s good-humor ice cream truck, which I'd painstakingly restored and retrofitted with a small, heavily insulated water tank. Its cheerful white and blue paint job was immaculate, the bells on its hood polished to a mirror shine. It was our morale officer, our psychological operations unit. We bypassed Carol's house, giving her a wide berth. I saw her on her porch, phone to her ear, her face a mask of furious indignation. She was no doubt calling the authorities on the rogue dairy parade that had just invaded her sanctum. Good. Let her. We pulled up to Mercy General's loading bay just as Dr. Sharma burst through the doors, her white coat flapping behind her. Her expression was a beautiful, chaotic mosaic of terror, confusion, and a tiny, flickering ember of hope. She looked at the Moo Mover, then the fire truck. Then her eyes landed on the popsicle, whose cartoon ice cream cone mascot smiled benignly down at her. You brought an ice cream truck?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. I hopped down from the cab, clipboard in hand. "It's for morale, Doctor," I said, my tone all business. "And hydration. People think better when they're hydrated, and not panicked. This truck solves both. Barry?" Barry, already out of the hydrant, gave a curt nod and started unspooling a thick 4-inch hose from the side of the moo mover. "Where's your intake pump, Doc? We need to bypass your main line and feed directly into your reserve tank." Dr. Sharma, shaking herself out of her stupor, pointed a trembling finger at a large covered access port on the wall. "There. It's the emergency intake. We've never had to use it before." "There's a first time for everything," I muttered, making a note on my clipboard. "Today is a day of firsts." Just as Barry slammed the heavy brass coupling onto the hospital's intake valve, the inevitable happened. The squeal of tires, the authoritative blue and red flashing lights reflecting off the windows. 2 of Harmony Creek's finest police cruisers slid to a halt behind my convoy, blocking us in. And out of the passenger seat of the lead car, like a demon summoned from the depths of a homeowners' meeting, emerged Carol. "Officers!" she shrieked, pointing a perfectly manicured finger at me. It was a finger that had condemned unapproved flower beds and non-regulation fence heights. Now it was aimed at me. "There he is, the ringleader of this illegal water smuggling operation. Look at his fleet of unregistered, hazardous commercial vehicles. He's probably stealing this water from the city reservoir. Arrest him!" Out of the cruisers stepped 2 men I knew well. Officer Dave, a man whose weary posture suggested he'd seen every form of human pettiness suburbia had to offer, and was profoundly tired of all of them. And his younger partner, Officer Ramirez, a guy who still had a spark of curiosity in his eyes, and seemed to find a certain professional amusement in the neighborhood's never-ending drama. Officer Dave pinched the bridge of his nose, a gesture I'd seen him use many times, always in Carol's presence. "Ma'am, please lower your voice. Water smuggling isn't a thing." "It is when he's doing it," Carol insisted. I sighed, stepping forward and flipping open the lid of the heavy-duty Pelican case I carried for just such occasions. Inside wasn't a weapon, but something far more powerful. Paperwork. I produced a thick, tabbed binder. "Officer Dave, Officer Ramirez," I said with a polite nod. "A pleasure as always. Carol, you're looking well hydrated." I turned back to the cops. "In this binder you will find my up-to-date business license for Suburban Solutions, LLC. Behind tab A, you will find the bill of sale and certified purity report for the 20,000 gallons of potable water I purchased from the Municipal Water Authority less than an hour ago. Behind tab B, the DMV registrations for all vehicles present. And behind tab C, I flipped to the last page with a flourish, you will find the permit for temporary obstruction of a public thoroughfare for the purposes of emergency civic relief, which I filed online with the city clerk's office precisely 11 minutes ago. It was approved 7 minutes ago. I've printed you a copy." I handed the binder to Ramirez. He took it, his eyebrows climbing his forehead as he thumbed through the laminated pages. He looked at me, then at the convoy, then back at me. A slow grin touched his lips. "Well, I'll be," he said, shaking his head. "He's got a permit and a purity report." Officer Dave just stared at Carol, his expression flat. "Ma'am, the hospital has no water. This man is providing the hospital with water he legally purchased. Unless you have any evidence that he is the one who, for some reason, shut off the main valve, I suggest you step back onto the curb and let these people do their work." Carol's face went crimson. But the noise! The bylaws! His ice cream truck is not on the approved vehicle color palette. "This is a city street, Carol, not your living room," Dave said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. "Go home." Defeated for the moment, she sputtered, shot me a look that could curdle milk, and stomped back toward the sanctuary of Harmony Creek. Ramirez handed me back my binder. "Nice setup you got here, Leo," he said, nodding toward the moo mover. "So, off the record, what do you think happened?" I leaned in conspiratorially. Off the record? I think someone with an award-winning garden and a thirst for victory decided to redirect a municipal water main for personal horticultural gain. I'd check the ground around the main shutoff valve. The one on the edge of Carol's property. I hear it's unusually damp over there. Almost swamp-like. Ramirez's eyes glinted with understanding. He pulled out his phone and made a quick note. Unusually damp. Got it. Thanks for the tip. Try not to cause an international incident, okay? I only cause local ones, I assured him, and only when necessary. The cops got back in their cars and left, leaving me with Dr. Sharma, who had watched the entire exchange with the wide-eyed wonder of a naturalist observing a bizarre new species. "That binder," she said, her voice filled with awe. "You were prepared for her." "Doctor," I said, turning back to the task at hand, "in my line of work, you don't prepare for the problem. You prepare for the people who create the problem." For the next hour, we were a well-oiled machine. Barry managed the flow from the moo mover, keeping the hospital's main reserve tank topped off. I used the pop cycle to deliver fresh, cold drinking water to the increasingly grateful hospital staff, who treated me like a visiting dignitary. The tinny jingle of the ice cream truck became a strange, hopeful anthem echoing through the sterile halls. But it was a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. The moo mover's 10,000 gallons would only last so long. The six-pack held another 1,650 gallons in reserve, but transferring it was slow. We were buying time, not solving the issue. I found Dr. Sharma in her office, which had become a makeshift command center. She was on the phone, her face grim. "They can be here on Thursday? Thursday? Do you understand this is a hospital?" She snapped into the receiver before slamming it down. "Excavation companies," she explained to me, rubbing her temples. "The city confirmed it. There's a rupture in the 6-inch main. It needs to be dug up and repaired. The earliest anyone can get a crew out here is in 2 days. I shook my head, pulling out my own phone. "You're calling the wrong people, Doctor. You're calling people on retainer, people who deal with planned maintenance. You need a guy who operates on a cash and chaos basis. You need a specialist." I dialed a number I knew by heart. The phone rang once before a gravelly voice answered with a single word. "Gus?" "Gus, it's Leo," I said. "The kid with the weird trucks," Gus grunted. "What'd you break now?" "Not me this time. There's a 6-inch water main rupture outside Mercy General. The city's dragging its feet. A certain HOA president is involved. I need you and your backhoe here 30 minutes ago." There was a pause, then a low chuckle. "HOA job, huh? That's double my rate. I hate those places. Full of people with too much time and not enough soul. But a hospital? Yeah, I can do that. I'm finishing a septic job in Crestwood. I can be there in an hour. It's gonna be expensive. Emergency rates are triple." "Just get here, Gus," I said. "Money is no object when regional gardening rivalries threaten public health." Gus arrived in exactly 58 minutes, his entrance even more dramatic than ours. His truck was a monstrous, mud-splattered Peterbilt that looked like it had survived a war, towing a flatbed trailer carrying a yellow backhoe that had clearly won that war. Gus himself was the human equivalent of his equipment, grizzled, weathered, and covered in a fine layer of professional grime. He was a man who measured problems by the cubic yard of dirt he needed to move to solve them. He spat a stream of tobacco juice onto the asphalt, narrowly missing my boot. "All right, kid. Where's the patient?" I walked him over to the edge of the property line, where the street met the immaculate green lawn of Harmony Creek. "City schematics say the main runs right along here. The rupture should be somewhere in this 20-foot stretch." Gus squinted, his eyes tracing the path. He kicked at the turf with his steel-toed boot. Then he froze. He pointed a thick, calloused finger. "What's that?" "That," I said with a deep sense of foreboding, "is Carol's prize-winning Crimson Jubilee rose bush. It's won Best in Show 3 years running." "Uh-huh," Gus grunted. "Well, its roots are about to meet the business end of my excavator bucket, because based on the sag in the ground right here, your break is directly underneath it." I looked at the rose bush. It was perfect. Not a single blemished leaf, not a single wilted petal. It was a monument to Carol's tyrannical dedication. According to the HOA bylaws, which I had unfortunately committed to memory, the unauthorized pruning of a decorative shrubbery carried a $500 fine. Willful destruction of a prize-winning plant was grounds for a lawsuit and public shaming at the annual potluck dinner. Digging up this bush was like spitting on the Mona Lisa in the middle of the Louvre. And Carol knew it. As Gus's backhoe rumbled to life, its diesel engine a roar of impending progress, she appeared as if summoned by the sound. But she wasn't alone. Flanking her were her 2 most loyal cronies. Martha, a woman who communicated exclusively through scandalized gasps, and Brenda, who wielded her phone like a weapon, recording everything for some future HOA tribunal. They didn't yell. They didn't scream. They did something far more effective. They linked arms and formed a human chain directly in front of the doomed rose bush. To add a surreal level of visual absurdity to the proceedings, they had each grabbed one of Carol's oversized decorative garden gnomes and were holding them like riot shields. Carol held up a laminated copy of the HOA bylaws. "This is protected community green space," she declared, her voice ringing with absolute certainty. "As per Bylaw 74, subsection C, paragraph 8, no soil may be disturbed without a unanimous vote from the Landscaping Committee, a committee which, I might add, I chair. This machine will go no further." Gus shut off the backhoe and leaned out of the cab. "Lady, I've got a city-issued emergency excavation permit here that trumps your little garden club rules. Now move it, or I'm going to start digging and you can explain your footprints to the paramedics." She didn't budge. She was an immovable object of pure, unadulterated entitlement. I knew I couldn't win with force. I had to use her own tactics against her, public opinion. I retrieved the megaphone from the hydrant. I clicked it on, the electronic squeal cutting through the tense silence. "Attention, residents of Harmony Creek," I announced, my voice booming across the quiet cul-de-sacs. "For your afternoon entertainment, a developing situation. A desperate woman is currently holding a hospital's water supply hostage in order to protect a common shrubbery. I repeat, the health, safety, and sterile environment of hundreds of patients, including the sick and elderly, is being threatened by a rose bush. Please do not be alarmed. This is just another Tuesday in our wonderful community." Heads started popping up in windows. A few brave souls wandered out onto their porches. I could see the gears turning in their minds, weighing their fear of Carol against the sheer, undeniable absurdity of the scene. A man who was previously washing his car slowly put his sponge down. A woman paused her gardening, trowel in mid-air. They were watching. My public address had rattled her. Realizing her human and gnome shield might not hold against the court of public opinion, Carol pivoted. She retreated from the front lines and opened a new theater of operations. The paperwork war. The first salvo came 20 minutes later, in the form of a nervous-looking city health inspector. Carol had called in an anonymous tip that my milk truck was an unsanitary health hazard. "I have a report of a contaminated dairy vehicle," the inspector said, looking utterly confused as he stared at the gleaming stainless steel tank currently saving a hospital. I smiled and handed him another binder, my sanitation and compliance binder. "You must mean the moo mover," I said cheerfully. "In here you'll find its weekly steam cleaning logs, the certificate of sanitation from its last inspection, a full chemical breakdown of its food-grade sealant, and a notarized affidavit stating it has not, in fact, carried dairy products since 1994. can I offer you a bottle of crisp, refreshing, and entirely sanitary water from the Popsicle? He blinked, overwhelmed by the sheer volume of my preparedness, mumbled something about a misunderstanding, and beat a hasty retreat. The second attack came via email. A cease and desist letter from a law firm, her cousin probably, claiming my fleet constituted an ongoing commercial nuisance and was demonstrably lowering property values. I forwarded it to my lawyer with the subject line, "You have to see this." The third was a call to the zoning commission. Brenda, her phone-wielding lieutenant, had filmed my convoy and submitted it as evidence that I was running an illegal industrial depot out of my warehouse. This one actually brought a city official to my door. Barry was starting to panic. "Leo, they're trying to shut us down. We've got a lawyer, the health department, and now the zoning guy on us all at once. She's outflanking us," he whisper-yelled, while Gus and his crew were forced to take a break, unable to proceed with the excavation. I calmly laid out all the complaints on my whiteboard. "She's not outflanking us, Barry. Look at the pattern. It's desperate. It's unfocused. She's not fighting a war. She's just throwing a tantrum with letterhead, and every tantrum has a breaking point." I looked at Gus, who was impatiently checking his watch. "We just need to give her a bigger reason to panic." But I was the one who was about to panic. My crisis phone buzzed. It was Dr. Sharma. "Leo, we have a problem," she said, and the strain in her voice was palpable. "A big one. The main reserve tank is down to its last 20%. The continuous operation is overheating the pumps for our internal backup system. They might fail, and the mayor is here." I felt the blood drain from my face. "The mayor? What mayor? Ananda?" "Our mayor. Mayor Thompson. He's here for a minor, unscheduled outpatient procedure. No one was supposed to know. But if the water goes out completely while he's in the building, this stops being a local news story about a crazy lady and a weird guy with a milk truck. This becomes a full-blown political incident on a city-wide scale. The press will be all over us. We need that pipe fixed, Leo. Now." As if on cue, Gus stomped over, throwing his hands up in the air. "Kid, we got an issue. A real one. I got a look at the pipe through a service port down the street. It's older than the city plans say. It's cast iron, not ductile. It's brittle. If we just cut into it to patch the rupture, the shock could shatter the whole line. We'd flood half the block, and the water would be out for days, not hours. I have to do this surgically. It's going to take time we don't have." The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The last drops from the moo mover were being pumped into the hospital. The mayor of the damn city was under their roof. Gus couldn't dig, and Carol was still standing on her lawn, a smug, victorious queen surveying her kingdom. We were out of time. We were out of water. We were out of options. My brain was racing, replaying every moment of the last few hours. The cops, the permit, the swampy ground, Ramirez's question. "Off the record, what do you think happened?" I needed more than a theory about damp ground. I needed proof, hard, undeniable, high-definition proof. It was time to stop playing defense. It was time to find the smoking gun, or, in this case, the dripping wrench. I turned to Barry. "Get the Sparrowhawk ready." Barry's eyes went wide. "The drone. Leo, Carol will have an aneurysm if she sees that thing flying over her yard. Bylaw 92, unauthorized aerial surveillance." Good, I said, a cold, clear plan forming in my mind. "I want her to have an aneurysm." The Sparrowhawk X1 was my pride and joy, a commercial-grade surveillance drone I normally used for high-angle gutter inspection and roofline integrity analysis. It had a 4K camera with a 20x optical zoom and thermal imaging capabilities. It was overkill for checking shingles. It was perfect for this. I piloted it from the cab of the hydrant, watching the feed on a tablet. The drone ascended silently, a mechanical bird of prey climbing into the blue suburban sky. I kept it high, circling over the neighborhood, before positioning it directly above Carol's property. "Okay, Sparrowhawk, let's go hunting," I murmured. I zoomed in on her back patio. Perfectly arranged furniture. A needlessly complex outdoor grilling station. Then, I panned over to her garden shed. It was a charming little structure, painted to match her house, with quaint flower boxes on the windows. Through the crystal-clear glass of the window, I saw it. There, leaning against a bag of premium fertilizer, was the massive city property wrench used on the main valve. The teeth were still flecked with mud, and a small puddle of water was forming beneath it on the clean concrete floor. The smoking wrench. But then I saw something else. Something my eyes had missed from the ground, but was glaringly obvious from above. I switched to the thermal camera. Most of the lawn was cool, shaded, but a thin, unnaturally straight line glowed with the heat of recently flowing water. It didn't lead from her normal sprinkler heads. It ran from a spot right next to the main city valve, snaking under her lawn, directly to the root systems of her prize-winning petunias and the crimson jubilee rose bush. My God, the sheer, audacious genius of it. She hadn't just turned off the hospital's water to increase her own pressure. She had installed a secret, illegal tap directly into the 6-inch city main. She was siphoning off unmetered water, thousands upon thousands of gallons to feed her garden. That illegal tap, combined with the sudden valve closure, is what caused the pressure shock that ruptured the brittle, old pipe. Her crime wasn't just turning a valve. Her crime had caused the entire disaster. The very thing she was protecting, the rose bush, was the beneficiary of the very crime that now threatened to destroy it. It was so beautifully, poetically ironic, it almost brought a tear to my eye. I saved the footage, but I knew calling the cops and showing them a video on my tablet wasn't enough. The situation demanded a bigger stage. It demanded theater. I looked at the big, blank white side of the moo mover, and I smiled. "Barry," I said into my walkie-talkie, "you know that high-lumen projector we use for the outdoor movie night experience package?" "Yeah?" Barry's voice crackled back. "Get it, and point it at the side of the milk truck. We're going to the movies." 5 minutes later, the stage was set. The sun was beginning to dip lower in the sky, creating the perfect lighting conditions. The crowd of curious neighbors had grown. Gus and his crew were watching, leaning on their shovels. Dr. Sharma had come back outside, a look of desperate hope on her face. I climbed atop the hydrant with my megaphone. "Ladies and gentlemen of Harmony Creek," I boomed. "Suburban Solutions, in association with the Public's Right to Know, is proud to present a short documentary feature presentation." With a click of a button on my tablet, the projector whirred to life. A massive, crystal-clear image filled the entire side of the moo mover. It was the live feed from the Sparrowhawk. I narrated as I piloted the drone. We begin our film with an aerial view of our tranquil community, but not all is as it seems. I swooped the drone down toward Carol's yard. Here, we see the meticulously maintained habitat of the Caranus suburbicus, a species known for its territorial aggression and obsession with lawn care. A few nervous chuckles rippled through the crowd. Carol, seeing the drone and hearing my voice, came storming out of her house. "What is the meaning of this? This is an invasion of my privacy. I'm calling the police!" "Too late. They're already on their way," I said calmly into the megaphone, never breaking my documentary narration. And now, we zoom in on the creature's den, a common garden shed. The image on the truck tightened on the shed window. Here we find a fascinating artifact, a wrench of the type used for city water mains. Notice the moisture indicating recent use, a classic example of tool use in this species. The crowd gasped. I had their full attention now. But the real discovery lies elsewhere, I continued, switching the feed to the thermal view. The glowing line of the illegal pipe appeared on the giant screen, a stark, damning piece of evidence. Using advanced imaging, we can see what the naked eye cannot. An illegal water line, a secret artery, siphoning lifeblood from the city to feed its insatiable horticultural ambitions. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the real reason for the water shortage. This wasn't about protecting a rose bush. It was about fueling a crime that broke the pipe and cut off a hospital. The crowd was silent for a beat, processing. Then they erupted, not in anger, but in a wave of shocked, gossipy murmurs. Carol's face was a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. Lies! It's all lies! Doctored footage! Slander! She started marching toward me, but she didn't get far. The squeal of tires announced the arrival of Officers Dave and Ramirez, this time with purpose. They'd clearly been called by me the second I had the footage. Ramirez got out of the car, his eyes fixed on the giant projection on the side of my truck. He looked at the glowing line, at the wrench in the shed, and then at Carol. He pulled out his own phone and I saw him pull up a city ordinance map. He nodded slowly. Officer Dave, however, looked more alive and energized than I had ever seen him. A slow, genuine smile spread across his face. He walked right up to Carol, his former weariness replaced by a steely resolve. Carol, he said, his voice carrying in the sudden silence. We have a few things to discuss, starting with felony destruction of public property, theft of municipal services, and about a dozen charges relating to reckless endangerment. Now, would you like to lead us to the wrench you used, or do my partner and I need to get a warrant and find it ourselves? Carol stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. The fight was gone, replaced by the cold, stark terror of being well and truly caught. With Carol detained and her cronies melting back into their beige houses, the last obstacle was gone. Gus gave me a nod of profound respect. Kid, you got a weird way of clearing a path, but damn if it ain't effective. He and his crew got to work. With the knowledge of the illegal tap, they knew exactly where the structural weakness was. They worked with a surgeon's precision, cutting into the ground around the shamed rose bush. Within the hour, they had exposed the break, cut out the damaged section, and were fitting a new, gleaming piece of ductile iron into place. I stood with Barry and Dr. Sharma near the hospital's loading bay, watching. The sun had set, and the scene was illuminated by the flashing lights of the police car and Gus's work lamps. It felt like the end of a very long, very strange war. Then, we heard it. A deep groaning from the hospital's pipes, followed by the sound of rushing water. I looked at Dr. Sharma. She was watching a pressure gauge on an external panel next to the intake valve. The needle, which had been sitting forlornly on 0, trembled. Then it began to climb, past the red, into the yellow, and then, beautifully, gloriously, into the solid green. A ragged cheer went up from a group of nurses and orderlies who had gathered at the door. Dr. Sharma let out a breath she looked like she'd been holding for 8 hours. She turned to me, her eyes shining with relief. I don't know how to thank you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. You and your dairy-themed rescue vehicle. I just tipped an imaginary cap. All part of the service at Suburban Solutions, Doc. Just then, a flock of news vans descended, their headlights cutting through the darkness. They'd gotten wind of the mayor's presence and the police activity, but they didn't get the story they were expecting. The cameras captured the final moments of the repair, the grateful hospital staff, and the sight of Carol, the decorated queen of Harmony Creek, being quietly led to the back of a police car, her face a crumpled mess of humiliation. The headline wouldn't be Mayor's Health Scare. It would be HOA President Arrested for Sabotaging Hospital Over Petunias. Justice, like the water I'd trucked in, was finally being served. A week later, the warehouse was quiet again. The moo mover was clean, the hydrant was polished, and Barry was tinkering with a new project, looking significantly less stressed. On a small TV in the corner of the office, a local news channel was running a follow-up report. And in an update to a story that captured the city's attention, the anchorwoman said cheerfully, former HOA President Carol Jenkins has pleaded no contest to multiple charges. She was hit with massive fines from the city and has been sentenced to 500 hours of community service at Mercy General Hospital, where a spokesperson says she has been assigned to the sanitation department. The screen showed a photo of Carol's perfect garden, now with a large, ugly patch of dirt where the rose bush used to be. The Harmony Creek Homeowners Association also announced that this year's Golden Trowel Award has been officially rescinded. Barry let out a low whistle. Cleaning bedpans. That's some poetic justice right there, boss. The universe occasionally enjoys irony as much as I do, I said, sorting through a stack of invoices. The bay door rumbled open and Dr. Sharma walked in, looking far more relaxed than the last time I'd seen her. She was holding 2 envelopes. She handed me the first one. It was a check from the Mercy General Hospital Board. The number of zeros on it made my eyes water. For your expenses and your trouble, she said with a small smile. With our deepest thanks. Happy to have been of service, I said, trying to look cool and professional as I stared at a number that could buy me a second, even more ridiculous fire truck. Then she handed me the second envelope. It was thick, on heavy cardstock with the official city seal. And this is from Mayor Thompson's office. He was incredibly impressed by your proactive problem-solving. He wants to retain Suburban Solutions as the city's official consultant for bizarre municipal crises. The pay, she added, her smile widening, is excellent. I was speechless. A city contract. My uncle's paranoid fantasies had just become a legitimate, government-sanctioned enterprise. After Dr. Sharma left, I was still staring at the contract when my phone buzzed with a new email. It was from the Harmony Creek HOA. A timid accountant named Gerald had apparently been installed as the new interim president. The email was a formal, groveling apology for the recent unpleasantness and gross overreach of authority. But it was the postscript that made me laugh out loud. P.S. The board has voted to undertake a complete review and overhaul of the existing bylaws. We were wondering if we could get a quote from Suburban Solutions to consult on redrafting them to be, for lack of a better term, less insane. I looked at the fat check in my hand, the lucrative city contract on my desk, and the email from my former nemesis, now begging for my help. I looked out at my fleet of beautiful, absurd trucks, gleaming under the fluorescent lights of the warehouse. You know, I said to Barry, who was now sketching something on a napkin, for an apocalypse, this suburban hellscape thing might just be the best business I've ever been in. That's great, boss, Barry said without looking up. Now about that gopher infestation over on Elm Street. I was thinking, instead of the sonic cannon, what if we tried a modified periscope and a very small, targeted net? I leaned back in my chair, a wide grin spreading across my face. The work never ended, and thank God for that.